Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Hanlon, and I'm a first year at Middlebury College, interested in political science and law. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to a new episode of our virtual career exploration series called MIDDVantage. This series will focus on the field of international development. You will get to hear from many talented members of the Middlebury community from a variety of institutions who will help us learn more about this challenging and rewarding field. In this episode, we are very lucky to be joined by Steve Rozner. Steve Rozner is Senior Fiscal Advisor in USAID's Bureau for Economic Growth, Education, and the Environment. In his capacity, he leads USAID's Domestic Resource Mobilization Workstream, through which the agency helps to put countries in a position to sustainably finance their development agendas on their own. Steve, having worked with USAID and previously with DAI, has more than 15 years of experience designing, managing, and implementing technical assistance in fiscal policy and management in countries spanning Africa, Asia, Central and Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and the LAC region. Steve is a 1996 graduate of Middlebury College, majoring in East Asian Studies and Chinese, and has a master's in International Relations and Economics from the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. Thank you so much, Steve, for taking the time to be with us today and answer some of my questions.
Thanks, Joe, for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. So to start out very broadly, what is the mission of USAID and how does the agency fit within the international development community?
Right. So USAID, sometimes we're referred to as just plain aid or USAID or USAID. All of them are valid. We are part of the foreign assistance arsenal of the US government. We are the largest of the agencies for the US government that works on foreign assistance and international development. And we do about $20 billion in work every year. That's about the size of our budget for programming overseas. And at its core, USAID's mission is really about helping put countries in a position to stand on their own. It's the old, you teach the fish, to teach the man to fish adage, as opposed to give a man a fish. We're really trying to put our partner countries in the position to be able to do the things that are required to grow and for their people to thrive. Everything from setting up sustainable health systems, education systems that allow people to grow and thrive, creating enabling environments for people to take advantage of economic opportunity, businesses to grow, entrepreneurs to take advantage of economic opportunities as well, and lots and lots of other things. So in a nutshell, we are a huge part of the international development arena, in that we're probably one of the biggest agencies in the world in the bilateral in the bilateral area, working on international development. That includes countries, besides us, like the United Kingdom and the European Commission, which represents the European Union countries, and many others. What we do is work alongside those bilateral agencies and others to implement our foreign assistance programs in a way that helps countries to accomplish their goals in development in areas like I described: health and education, agricultural development, financial sector and financial inclusion, you name it. And in addition to work with the U.S. government, federal government, interagency to see through our particular priorities, working with those countries, through the work that we do at USAID. I'll just add also to that is that we do also play an important role in engaging with and collaborating with international organizations, including the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and many others. We are In some instances, we are a funder who funds the work of those various international organizations. In other instances, I've had the pleasure myself of working in collaboration in the field with several of these international organizations as a partner. So, you know, the work of USAID is wide and broad, and in many places very deep, and covers a whole lot of areas. But you know, I would say that, you know, in a nutshell, our work is really about helping our partner countries to be able to you know, write their own narrative and to be able to you know, to grow and thrive and you know, be able to develop the kinds of systems and communities that allow everybody to take advantage of economic growth.
Thank you for that explanation. So it sounds like USAID kind of has a lot of long-term goals that take a long time to implement and make sustainable. So my next question is, how does the work and mission of USAID shift and develop with domestic political changes?
That's a great question. So, you know, it's true of any federal agency in the U.S. You know, with political changes, the changes in administration, you do have changes. Number one, in leadership, and with changes in leadership, you have, you know, oftentimes a change in vision around the priorities of the agency, and that's no less true for USAID than it is for any other agency or department at the federal level. But you know, I think at its core, USAID's, you know, mission has been unwavering for the 50+ years of its existence. It still is about fundamentally doing international development work and doing it with our partner countries. The shifts are oftentimes more subtle than that. The shifts can be from one administration to the next, being, you know, in one administration having a stronger focus on multilateralism, about working together with a multitude of partners, versus another administration may be much more focused on, we want to work in a bilateral way with the partner country to help the partner country achieve progress on whatever issues are you know, on its plate. You know, each administration, as it, you know, with changes, they come in with new ideas and new initiatives. So a lot of what we do and where our efforts are focused are driven by where the funding is coming from. So if a new administration comes in and wants to prioritize food security issues, that will usually be backed by new funding or redirected funding, and that will change the focus of many of our colleagues, both in Washington and in the field. You know, it might be about women's economic empowerment and issues around, you know, gender balance in society in the partner countries where we work, and so that will often be backed by new funding or redeployment of funding to issues or to programming that addresses those particular topics. So I think that you know, those political changes do introduce you know, new work streams and new focal points. But you know, I think I've had the benefit of working through a change in administration just a few years ago. It hasn't in any really fundamental way changed the nature of my work. I'm still an economist. I still work on government fiscal issues, on public finances. If anything, you know, it's only reinforced the work that I do in that, you know, under the current administration, there's a much more of a focus on country progress and on increasing country self-reliance, and that's very much at the heart of what I do, which is putting countries in the position to sustainably finance their development.
Thank you. So touching on that, what does your role look like within USAID? Like, what are some of the daily responsibilities you have, and how do they relate to the long-term focuses of your office?
Right. So at USAID, there's a number of different roles that people play. My role is a technical advisory role, but we're also supported by a variety of other role players at the agency. There are first there's the foreign service officers and our civil service officers. Foreign service officers, of course, work around the world. They're based in countries where we have a presence. Civil service staff are usually based in Washington, D.C. or some other U.S. location, and support various or multiple countries or a particular issue set. And of course, there's our foreign service nationals, which are the local staff and colleagues in the countries where we work, such as in Uganda, our Ugandan staff, or in the Philippines, our Filipino and Filipina staff. And altogether, it's the collaboration between these different roles that really makes USAID tick. But in terms of what my role looks like as an advisor on technical issues, I do just that. I provide counsel, I provide technical advice, I provide assistance to a range of our colleagues in the agency and our partners in our countries on specific issues around public finance, around public administration, around planning policy reforms and broader administrative reforms in government. And helping to plan those things out in a way that makes sense and that reflects what we know from experience works in around the world. It involves raising awareness of the importance of these types of issues around the agency, to include education and training. So one of the things I do very regularly is develop and deliver training both for our USAID colleagues and for our partners in our countries on these very issues, on how tax systems are designed, how governments manage budgets, how you manage and plan for borrowing and debt, an issue which has become very important and prominent in the discussions around COVID right now, is how countries are going to be able to manage the huge amounts of debt that they're going to be taking on in order to pay for for recovery from COVID and for maintenance during COVID when people aren't able to work or do all the normal things that they were accustomed to doing. And so it's being in that role, it's part of my responsibility to help the rest of the agency understand these issues and how to think about them in the areas where they work. So even if you're an officer working in a Latin American country and your portfolio is education issues, or your portfolio is governance or rule of law issues, it's still important for you to understand the role that governments play in financing and paying for the things that you're supporting. And so my job is to make sure that lens is applied to everything that we do. There's a lot of writing involved in my job, and so setting aside the time that I'm able to make for really applied research, it's really the kind of writing that it's the senior leadership requesting one page on what it takes to build a sustainable tax system for a country, and that's something that takes 50 to 100 pages to explain properly. But if you can do it in one page, you can be successful at USAID, and that's one of the things that we have to do on a daily basis. Being able to communicate complex concepts in digestible language to a variety of different audiences, I think that flows from the same place that allows you to be able to give somebody 5 bullets to encapsulate a topic that really deserves 100 pages. Having the ability to distill concepts like that, I think is really important to my job. And, broadly speaking, how this fits into the agency's long-term strategy, I think it's fundamental to what we do. If you think of USAID's job as putting ourselves out of a job, then what I do and how I counsel and advise our colleagues and our partners is all about putting our partners in a position to be able to do things without us over time. And we've seen that succeed in many countries that have transitioned from traditional aid relationships with the U.S. How that works.
Thank you for that. It sounds like a very challenging but also rewarding job, and super interesting as well. My next question goes back in time a bit, and I was wondering if you could walk us through your career path after you graduated Middlebury, and maybe you could describe any notable experiences you had while attending Middlebury that informed and directed your professional life.
Yeah, so after Middlebury, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't have a career path. I didn't even have a general professional area of interest to describe. So what I did was I punted, and I took a year and spent that in China, which is where I happened to also spend my junior year abroad while I was at Middlebury. And in China, I enrolled at Nanjing University for a year in a program that was jointly run with Johns Hopkins University as a joint venture, and just spent that time, trying to get a sense of what might interest me. I knew that I wanted to spend time in China, living and working after college, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So that year was an opportunity for me to just, be on the ground and get exposure to different types of opportunities and different types of career paths, and figure it out from there. And lo and behold, I through a variety of connections through Middlebury networks and other networks, I landed in a coffee chat with someone in Hong Kong who was an editor for the Economist Group, the magazine and publishing organization. That when they met me, I was pretty rough around the edges. I didn't have a lot of practical work experience, but what I did have that was valuable to them was I had fluency in Chinese. I had good writing skills, and that certainly drew from my time at Middlebury. There's nothing that professors hammered home more for me than the importance of persuasive and incisive writing. And I had an ability and willingness to travel. And so the Economist Group hired me to work for their Economist Intelligence Unit to basically go out and find stories on, what's going on in China in terms of the economy, and in terms of opportunities to do and to grow businesses, particularly from the perspective of potential foreign investors and foreign companies, which was really growing at that time. This was in the early and mid 90s. And that was just, for me, that was just a great training ground for learning how to ask good questions. Middlebury was absolutely, but in that job, I really learned how to ask good questions and to dispose of preconceived ideas, because you never know when you're chasing a story what you're going to find. You have to be open to finding that your original assumptions weren't quite right, or they were completely wrong, and be willing to, and have the humility to pivot and adapt and change your path. And that's something which is so incredibly important in international development work: the willingness and the humility to pivot, adapt, to dispense with your old ideas and be willing to accept failure as a learning opportunity rather than as failure for failure's sake. And it's something which I continue to sort of rely on today as you know, everything I do in development is experimenting. I try to draw on what I did last time, but unfortunately in development, what you did last time often doesn't work the next time. So you've got to make adjustments and calibrate every time you address a challenge that looks similar to the last one you saw. From there, after several years of writing and editing in China and Hong Kong, I lived in Hong Kong for several years there. I decided to go back to school, and that's when I got my master's at Johns Hopkins, the SICE program. And that was again, it was driven by a desire to sort of deepen my understanding of economics and applied economics, which I didn't have coming out of Middlebury, but had started to develop when I was working for the Economist Intelligence Unit. It wasn't necessarily with the idea in mind that I would transition into international development. But when I came to DC, where SICE is based, and started looking at the DC community and what the big sectors and industries were, international development was one of the more prominent ones for somebody with an interest in international relations and economics. And so that's kind of how I happened upon international development, differently from many of my colleagues in the international development, field and my peers who came at it from experience in the Peace Corps or something of that nature, something more grassroots. I came at it kind of by accident. But I think it was in part the experiences I had at Middlebury, both in terms of learning how to develop good critical thinking and analytic skills and writing skills, but also the language skills, and the ability to and willingness to travel that really came in handy for me when I started to think about a potential career in international development. And I can't say enough in that regard for the value of spending time studying abroad and living abroad during my Middlebury experience. As I mentioned, I spent my full year abroad, a year and then some, both of the summers in between, traveling around China and Taiwan, studying. I did independent study in Taiwan. I got my own apartment, found myself a tutor, and decided to study classical Chinese, because why not? But it was less about what I wanted to learn about. It was more about cultivating life skills, the ability to walk off of a plane or a bus or a train anywhere, in the world, and be ready to say, okay, I can figure this out. I can find my way, even when I don't necessarily speak the language or speak it well yet. And having that opportunity was absolutely foundational to what I do today. And the long story short about how I ended up where I am now is after SICE, I was fortunate to land a job opportunity at DAI, which is one of the prominent consulting firms and implementing partners for USAID and many other donors as well. They work with the European Commission and DFID and the World Bank and other donors around the community. And had nearly 12 years of wonderful experiences, both working out of their headquarters in Bethesda, Maryland, but also having opportunities to live and work in several countries around the world, where I got to really roll up my sleeves and work on a particular development problem, day in and day out for extended periods of time, which was an absolutely amazing opportunity and a great experience in terms of working with multicultural and cross-cultural teams. Places like Bosnia Herzegovina after the war, the Philippines, Nigeria, Kenya, Jamaica, just really fascinating experiences doing very different things in different places. And you know, it was by dint of all those experiences and the way that I was able to specialize in the area where I focus now, which is public finance, that USAID eventually approached me. I didn't apply for a job at AID. They approached me and asked me would I consider coming to work for them, and that was about 6 years ago. And that's kind of how I ended up where I am now.
Thank you for that. It's nice to hear that Middlebury's education you received extends itself into your current professional life and also kind of gave you the freedom to find what you were interested in after Middlebury. My final question is, as many graduates are entering a very turbulent job market, what suggestions do you have for those looking to work in international development? How can applicants distinguish themselves and gain pertinent experience with limited travel and in-person options?
That's a great question, Joe. And I acknowledge and appreciate that COVID and the situation that it's created has just made it very difficult. If it wasn't already difficult to get a job in international development as a very competitive industry, this has only made it more difficult. That you can't easily get together for coffee chats, go on job interviews and whatnot. And I know a lot of organizations are feeling very vulnerable right now, not knowing, whether they're going to be able to rely on sustained funding from their regular clients, including agencies such as USAID. We don't know what our budgets are going to look like down the line. So that ultimately affects job prospects as well for people looking to join the organizations that depend on agencies such as mine for their lifeblood. But I would say that, I would say that there's a number of things that Middlebury students could be doing to set themselves up for success and to be able to capitalize on opportunities, and even in this environment. And number one is staying engaged in the conversations and dialogues that are happening in the community. If there wasn't already a lot happening in terms of brown bags and events before COVID, I think it's only multiplied since COVID hit. And the number of invitations to webinars and virtual porch chats and the like that I receive every day now, every topic under the development. It just you can't imagine how much is happening now, and I think it's been driven by this anxiety in the community that if we're not talking to one another, then we're not doing anything, because people are very they're struggling to figure out how do we continue to make development progress and not lose momentum on the work that we've been doing when we can't physically get together with our partners. So all these events are out there, and many of them are public. You need to know about DevX, which is both a platform for news and information and knowledge sharing, but it's also one of the best job boards, global job boards for international development jobs. Staying engaged with what they're doing and events that they're hosting. Get out there and be a part of those conversations. And to follow up on that, reach out to your networks. Middlebury networks, other networks that you might have. There's an amazing array of Middlebury talent, alumni out there working in the development community. I discover new fellow alums every day at USAID and other places, working at various levels of the organizations. At USAID, many my fellow mid-grads are working in the senior ranks of the agency. And it's not surprising at all to me, knowing what kind of preparation Middlebury gives you for something like international development. But staying in touch with those people, reaching out. I think now more than before, we have time for coffee. We just do it over Zoom. It's easier to do now because it doesn't require you having to leave the comfort of your desk seat. And in those conversations, talk about the things that you've been hearing about in the webinars, and talk about the things you've been reading about in the literature. If you're going to be talking to somebody at USAID, read up, go to the website, and read up on some of the major threads of our work. What are the key initiatives? What are some of the interesting case studies or success stories that we're putting out there, and bring those to talk about. Those kinds of things are, you make for much more interesting conversation than sort of, plugging somebody for what's the best way to apply for a job. Those can be part of the conversation, but I think you get there by first demonstrating that you have a real interest and enthusiasm and aptitude for the subject matter. And as I said, the job I got at USAID did not come from responding to a call for resumes. The job I got at DAI did not come from a call for resumes. It was all about networking. And I don't think that's changed in this environment. I think that, COVID definitely changes the way that we engage and communicate with one another. But it hasn't changed, fundamentally how international development how you come about the opportunities. That's my experience. Somebody else might tell you something different. But it's really about being tenacious and putting yourself out there and being educated and up to date. And reading both the theoretical and the practical and applied literature on the topic. Many of us development practitioners have long since put away and the theoretical, the books and the articles and things like that, and we're now into the what works and why kinds of questions, and so that's what we're reading. So come to the table ready to talk about those things.
Thank you for that piece of advice. I think it is really good to know that there's still lots of opportunities for networking and ways to learn, even though lots of normal parts of life are interrupted. Those are all the questions I have for you. Do you have any final words or anything you'd like to say?
Now, I just wanted to thank you, Joe, for giving me this opportunity to talk with you and to share with the Middlebury community. I am extremely fond of Middlebury and all it has to offer. And I am always available and open to talking to Middlebury students who have questions about careers and development, or just about navigating life beyond college, whatever it might be. You can feel free to reach out to me. My email is sa.rozner, that's SAROZNER @gmail.com. If I don't respond to you right away, I'm sure I'll respond to you at some point. But if you don't hear from me, just give me another gentle nudge, and I'll make sure I get back to you. But thanks for this opportunity, and best of luck to you and everybody else in the community.
Thank you so much, Steve, for taking the time to speak with me and help me and other Middlebury students and graduates learn about international development and USAID. Thank you to those watching this episode of MIDDVantage. We hope you will check out future episodes in this and other career conversations.
Thanks.